Hi, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast, People Helping People. I'm Shara Goswick, your host. Today on the podcast, I chat with Brianne Rush, who founded the Independence Lab. With this incredible program, she is helping people go from college to career with confidence. She's helping teach people how to stand out as they apply for jobs and even in the current job that they're in. This is a great program, and she points out some very important tools that you need whenever you are applying for that first job out of college. I love what she's doing. I think she's super helpful. I encourage you, after you listen, to recommend her to someone, point them to her website and her newsletters and the programs that she has. I promise you will not be disappointed. Thanks for being here.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So tell me a little bit about yourself and tell me what led you to start the Independence Lab, because I think this is such a great thing.
Well, thank you. And
Yeah,
thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
absolutely.
I was able to land my dream job just out of college. It was an unpaid internship that turned into this amazing opportunity in New York City. And after that, I moved into marketing and became the head of a content marketing department at an agency, and then moved into the same company, but a role that's completely different. So, my role now in my day job is VP of operations for
Wow.
this agency. And looking back at, connecting those dots and how I was able to get promotions, get this dream job, I realized I wasn't actually like the best writer. I wasn't the best, when it came to technology. But what I did have was emotional intelligence. So I was very much able to understand what my boss's needs were or my clients' needs were, and actually go ahead and see those challenges and bring solutions to the table. And I also was learning how to communicate very well. So all those things added up in a way that helped me, like I said, land this really cool job in New York City and then get promotions and salary increases down the line. And so what I wanted to do is really help young women understand that it's not just the hard skills that are going to get you into the companies that you want to work at or the promotions that you're looking to get. It's
Right.
this idea of soft skills and emotional intelligence. So
Mhm.
that's why I started the Independence Lab, is to help them develop that side of their professional lives. And I'm very excited to help them do that because it's something that absolutely anybody can learn.
Absolutely. I think it is so important. And I know you focus on Gen Z. Is there
Mhm.
a reason you focus specifically on that age group?
Yeah, there is just such this big transition in life, going from college into your career life. It's a huge change, and there's so much opportunity about,
Yeah.
but there's so little guidance, right? So
Right.
you can find yourself kind of just going in too many directions or not the right direction. And so that's why I just feel like if you can give them a little bit of guidance while keeping that, the opportunities in sight, then it's super helpful for them because that just doesn't exist. It didn't exist for
Right.
me, and I don't see
Yeah.
it so much now. So that's why that group specifically, obviously anybody can use
Sure.
emotional intelligence and build that skill set, but
Yes.
that's what I'm focused on right now.
That's awesome. So tell me about, I know one of the things you talk about is secret workplace rules that nobody talks about. Can you share one that maybe surprised you as you've had this work?
Yeah, so I think there's this idea of you need to be the absolute best at something, but what actually whoever's interviewing you, maybe during a job interview, or your boss is looking for in the next leader of the company, is actually these communication skills and these empathy skills that we talked about a little bit earlier. And so that's the secret, is really start building those skills alongside your hard skills, and you're going to be unbeatable. And I
Right.
think there's really sometimes this focus on I have to be the best coder or I have to be the best AI prompt engineer. And you do have to be good at your skill set, but if you can't explain what you're doing, if you can't explain your
Right.
value, if you can't communicate with clients or customers or your colleagues, then those skills aren't going to go beyond, your certain lane. So if you want to move up in your company, if you want to get into leadership roles, that's where you need to actually spend more of your time.
Yeah. What about job hopping? I know that's something that you talk about, and I know it's a thing, it's a real thing. Why is it so important, and how should these young professionals respond to that?
Think there's some of these penalties for Gen Z that nobody actually says out loud.
Yeah.
But, I'm in a role right now where I'm actually doing interviewing and hiring for our company. So I'm seeing this a lot of, well, they were only in a role for, a year or less. And then they went to another company and it was a year or less. And then another company a year or less. And so there's these penalties that people are getting. And sometimes it's because they needed a higher salary, or sometimes it was they were at a startup that didn't work out. It's definitely got to be something that a hiring manager looks at. But if that's the only thing
Mhm.
holding you back from talking to somebody, definitely go ahead and talk to them, because I think Gen Z has been given this advice to look
Right.
around, get higher salaries where you can. But if you're building the right culture at your company, they're going to want to stay. Like, I've been at my company for 13 years, and
Right.
it's because, the culture is correct there, that it's a good place
Right.
to want to work and stay. So unfortunately, we are seeing these penalties. There's a couple other ones too, but for
Yeah.
job hopping, it's when you find a good place, and I'm talking to that Gen Z, when you find a good place, build that relationship there, and stay as long as you can to build on that. But, don't hesitate to do what's best for your career.
Yeah. What do you think happened between, my generation and, down to the Gen Z? People in my generation are even older than me, went to work and stayed in the same place forever, for
Mhm.
a long time. My husband's been in this job for over 20 years. And then before that, he was, in one job. It just wasn't as common to hop around and switch. What changed, do you think, over the years?
Yeah, I think we have remote working now. So you have the
Yeah.
opportunity to work a lot more places than you could before, right? So
Yeah.
you can work. My dad's an accountant, same thing. He worked there for his pretty much entire life.
Yeah.
And so it was a local one. But now, if he was starting over, he could work
Right.
for an accounting firm across the country, and they get a better job at one over here. And so
Yeah.
of course, the remote working. Also, I think it's just this idea of probably what we're doing right now is sharing advice and things like that.
Yeah.
So people are hearing more advice than they used to before. And so you're hearing, well, here's how to negotiate, here's how to get a bigger role, or whatever it is. They're taking this education and they're applying it to better their careers. And I think that that's okay to continuously move along and grow if you're
Right.
not finding that where you are now.
Yeah, it's just so very different than it was before. Things have
Yeah.
changed a lot. So, one
Yeah.
thing you talk about is the five-step framework to help professionals get noticed. Can you talk me through some of those?
Yeah, so emotional intelligence is a little bit abstract. So, what we want to think about is just concrete ways that we can actually put that into practice for yourself. And so, what I created is what I'm calling the EQ5 success method. So, it's
Hmm.
5 steps. They all begin with S to make it really easy to work through this. And so, the first one is self mastery. And really, what that is just identifying your own emotions. So, the concrete way to do that is to set a phone alarm 2 times, 3 times a day to simply just check in with yourself. That's all you have to do. So, in the morning, how am I feeling? Did I sleep well? Am I agitated? How is that going to play out the rest of my day? How do I fix that? And then after a meeting that you may have had, or a job interview, you check in with yourself. How did that go? If I was nervous, how did I handle that? If I was interrupted, how did I handle that? If something caught me off guard, did I self regulate and take some breaths? You can ask yourself these questions and just learn what your strengths and your weaknesses are, so that
Sure.
you just start to learn about yourself and your emotions. So that's number one. Number two is stability under pressure. So learning to self regulate. And I'll give you a quick little story about that. My very first job interview, it was what I mentioned, my dream interview for this company I really wanted to work at in New York City. And she asked me a question I just did not prep for. It's my first interview.
Yeah.
I just really didn't do a good job preparing. And so she asked me this question. I did not have an answer. And I'm just thinking in my head, man, I just completely blew it. I blew it. But what I did is I took a breath and I said, can we come back to that question? So went through the rest of the interview, and at the end, I said, "All right, I'm ready to answer this question." I did, and she said, "Okay, thank you." And again, I was just still thinking like I did not get this job. But what it turns out is she was so impressed by the way that I handled that situation,
Yeah.
she created an internship for me. So
Wow.
yeah, so that stability under pressure. How are you going to handle yourself if something unexpected comes up? In any way, or you're nervous, or you're just stumbling. Well, what are you going to do? How do you handle that?
Yeah.
Understand what's going to throw you off and how you get back on track. That's number two. Number three is social intelligence. So noticing who holds the influence when you're at work. Who does your boss look to? Who do they trust? Who has that like silent power? Just understanding that and understanding, the flow of things in any social stance. It's how you're going to start learning how to develop those skills yourself. So
Yeah.
if your boss is looking to somebody and they are commanding the room in a really good way, or their presenting skills are on par, or they're really like digging down and active listening. Those are some skills that you can see who's doing a good job and apply those things to yourself. So just looking around the room, understanding who's doing what well, who respects who, and then applying that to your own behaviors. Strategic communication is number four. So,
Mhm.
working on your communication skills, that's so
Right.
easy to say. It's so hard to do.
Yes.
People have such a hard time with public speaking. But if
Mhm.
you want to move up, you have to figure out how to get comfortable with this.
Yeah.
And I used to be terrified to be in front of a camera, and here we are. So,
Yeah.
it's possible to do that. And I would recommend these young people, Toastmasters, if you have that in your area, get involved with those types of clubs, or just start volunteering for things at work. It is okay if you stumble. It is okay if you don't speak perfectly all the time, but the more that you start taking action in these things, the better it's going to be for you. You're going to build that
Yeah.
confidence muscle. And so I just highly recommend putting yourself in those uncomfortable positions where you're going to
Right.
have to speak a little bit, and you'll get better. And then the fifth one is smart money moves. And we haven't talked about this at all yet, but I think it's so important for these people who are coming from college into their careers is understanding their financial foundation when they
Mm.
start getting those paychecks coming in. Because if you're nervous about your money, or things aren't as solid as they should be, it's going to affect every other part of your life. And
Yeah.
so I really feel like if you can do a 30-day challenge, just audit. What that looks like is just, what did I buy? And did I need this? Or was this an emotional buy?
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't buy it. I'm just saying keep track of that. Look back
Yeah.
over your 30 days and see what kind of emotional spending you're doing and how you can maybe curb that to create this really good foundation as you move forward. So it kind of goes back to that emotional intelligence
Sure.
side as well.
Those are
So
great.
yeah, it's a lot,
Very
but
helpful.
I think it's those are easy steps that you can take.
Right. And that's good for anybody, not
Yeah.
just Gen. That's good for anybody. Those are all really important. So, tell us about the program that you have and how do people get involved with what you're doing?
Yeah, so it's the Independence Lab is really it's a educational hub where people can go to just start learning these things.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of stories where I get really vulnerable about how I messed up and what I learned from it and what you can learn from it. But what it boils down to is I have a weekly newsletter,
Hmm.
and people can get that in their inbox free every Thursday. It takes less than 5 minutes to read
Awesome.
and go through these stories and just start applying these things to yourself. So you would just go to theindependencelab.com to sign up, and you can get it for free.
So, can you tell me about a mistake that you made early on that you it's maybe a common one that you want to talk about that you learned from.
Yes, well, the first one was not preparing well for my interview. So
Right.
step number one, prepare well.
Right.
um, but one that I talk about is I got moved up into what is called a managing editor role at this magazine that I worked at. And it was my job to get the magazine to press on time.
Oh, wow.
And my very first time, I was missing a couple spreads. They just were not done yet. I was supposed to be done on Friday afternoon. And I just had a couple that got pushed back till Monday. And I had somebody there, oh, that's okay, it happens. So I was like, okay, no big deal. Well, on Monday, my boss pulled me aside and was like, we discussed this. It was Friday, the deadline, and things are not done. And so there was very little I could do to fix that, right?
Right.
It was a huge mistake that I made. So I talk a lot about what you should do when you make a mistake. And there's just two steps, really. It's apologize, first of all.
Right.
And I think a lot of people are afraid to do that because they think, oh, well, it makes them look weak, or they
Yeah.
just don't really understand how important it is. But it's a huge step. So apologize. And then the
Yeah.
second step is tell that person what steps you're going to take to fix it. So
Yeah.
that's something super important is don't just say you're sorry and slink back. You got to tell them how you're going to fix it, what steps you're going to take to make sure it doesn't happen again.
That's so good. And there's got to be a balance of being confident. Okay, yes, I messed up. I'm going to own up to it and I'm going to, tell you how I'm going to fix it, but also being humble and, wanting to learn and wanting to grow. How can Gen Z balance that, being humble and, knowing they don't know everything, and then also being confident in what they're doing?
Volunteer, raise your hand, do the things that nobody else wants to do. It's nobody's job to do this, so you do it.
Yeah.
One of those things for me was sales at our digital marketing agency. It wasn't anybody's job to do sales. There was nobody that was like making sales materials. So I just
Right.
started doing it. And even though I wasn't super comfortable with it, I stepped in, I learned, excuse me, and I created things. And it was the biggest confidence booster for me. It's like, oh, I
Wow.
can do this. I can do
Yeah.
these things. Did everything go super well? Maybe not every time, but
Yeah.
that's where you learn is when you're uncomfortable. And I think the more that you put in the work and the more you raise your hand for things, your bosses are going to notice, their bosses are going to notice, you're going to notice on the inside. So I would definitely say for any of those things that come up for those projects that are a little bit messy, raise your hand for those.
Yeah. That's really good. What is one piece of advice you could give someone like a new graduate right now before they enter the workplace? I know you have all these resources and lots of great resources and help for them. But what is one piece of advice you would give to a new graduate?
I would say that curiosity and confidence is going to outrank your credentials. So what I mean by that is if you can go into an interview and showcase that you are anxious to learn, that you are a self learner, that you take steps to learn things, that
Yeah.
you have this curiosity, it is going to do wonders for you getting job interviews
Yeah.
and job offers, really. And that people want to hear about you mastering your skills, but what they want to do is actually hire somebody that's going to grow, that they are not going to have to micromanage. And so
Yeah.
if you're showing them that side of you and that kind of exploration side of you, it's going to just make the biggest impact on your career journey at the beginning.
I agree. So, is there anything I have not asked you about? I mean, you've got some great resources for these young people entering the workforce. Is there anything I haven't asked you about you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think another penalty that Gen Z is often seeing or feeling, I guess, because nobody says it out loud, is that they are kind of labeled as entitled. Like they think that they
Right.
deserve these huge salaries coming right out of school,
Yeah.
or, that they should get to work less but still make the same, or whatever it may be. There's just this weird feeling of like entitlement when it comes to Gen Z. And maybe some people deserve that. I'm sure the majority of them don't, though. And
Right.
so something that I think is important to get out there is, how do you advocate for yourself without being entitled? And I
Right.
think the answer to that is to start doing the work before you ask for the raise or the promotion. So
That
if
is
you're
good.
yeah, if you're able to take on something that is above and beyond your role, if you're able to, like we said, raise your hands for those projects or start learning, even if you're not necessarily doing something, start
Right.
learning the skill that your boss does or the person above you does, then it's impossible for somebody to call you entitled if you're already doing that work. So
Yeah.
that's really important once you're in the workforce and doing these things, to start building your career foundation that way, instead of just saying, well, I want this raise and then I'm going to start doing the work.
Yeah. That is so good. I think this, what you're doing is so important. I'm so excited I got to talk to you today. And I thank you for sharing it with me.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on. This is a great thing that you're doing and putting this out there. So I appreciate just being involved.
Absolutely. I hope you enjoy your day.
You too. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.